When German soldiers were captured on the battlefields of Europe, whether in North Africa, Italy, or following the storm of D-Day, they carried with them a deeply rooted belief, one systematically reinforced by Nazi propaganda. America was weak. They were told the United States was nothing more than a patchwork of immigrants, soft factory workers, and spoiled youth incapable of enduring the brutality of real war. Compared to the hardened warriors of the Wehrmacht, Americans were supposedly clumsy amateurs. This propaganda was crucial. It served to inflate German morale and minimize the perceived threat of a formidable industrial power. Upon capture, many clung to this arrogance. Their pride, bruised by defeat, found comfort in ridicule. They scoffed at their American guards, muttering that the U.S. was nothing without its machines, that Americans couldn't win without overwhelming numbers and endless supplies. In their minds, they were still the elite. On the transport ships bound for the United States, this arrogance often spilled over into open laughter. They shared jokes about the dirty, chaotic camps they expected to see, anticipating cruelty, hunger, and humiliation, nightmares that were easier to believe than the possibility that their enemy was stronger and more organized than they had been told. For the prisoners, keeping up this mocking attitude was a form of self-preservation, especially given the presence of hardline Nazis who acted as internal overseers, ready to punish any sign of defeatism or admiration for the enemy. But beneath the surface, doubt had already been sown. They had, after all, seen the endless columns of American tanks and trucks rolling through France. They had felt the weight of the U.S. Air Force's bombing raids that shattered cities and supply lines with relentless precision. Even as they laughed, some wondered silently, how could a weak nation produce so many planes, so many ships, so much firepower? The ships they were on, often converted Allied vessels, underscored the paradox. Still, the bravado continued. They mocked the guards as they stood watch, claiming the only reason America was in the war was money, not courage. The journey to America was the first decisive shock. The Atlantic crossing, tense due to the threat of German U-boats, an irony not lost on captured submariners, nevertheless offered conditions that disarmed them. They were given blankets, warm meals, and medical checks, a stark contrast to the brutality they had braced for. When the ships pulled into harbor, the industrial reality hit with full force. Towering cranes, endless rows of trucks, and sprawling factories lined the docks. The sheer scale of America's industry was staggering. This was not the weak, fractured nation of their propaganda. For the first time, certainty began to erode. Disembarking, they expected jeering crowds or cruel treatment, but instead found indifference. To a nation mobilized on such a massive scale, which would produce over 300,000 aircraft during the war and ultimately house nearly 400,000 German POWs, a few thousand prisoners were a logistical footnote. As they were transported inland on long, powerful locomotives, the landscape they passed through shocked them. Vast, productive farmland, modern cities, highways packed with cars, and factories that seemed to run endlessly. Everywhere they looked, they saw abundance and order. The mocking tone grew quieter. They had expected chaos, but instead saw a nation humming with disciplined energy and prosperity, fighting a massive war without sacrificing its domestic vitality. Inside the internment camps, the final layer of propaganda was stripped away. They braced for barbed wire cages and starvation rations, but were marched into camps that contradicted their nightmares. The barracks were simple but clean, and the meals shocked them most of all: bread, meat, vegetables, sometimes even coffee. They joked bitterly that they were eating better in captivity than many of their families back in Germany were on ration cards. The rules were firm, but the discipline was not cruel. Guards rarely intervened beyond enforcing basic security, often treating the prisoners with indifference rather than hostility. The German prisoners were often allowed to move about during the day, work in kitchens or gardens, and play soccer on open fields. As weeks turned into months, the camp environment became a subtle instrument of cultural exposure. American authorities allowed libraries, classrooms for language lessons, and instruments for music. German orchestras and theater groups sprang up inside the wire. For many, this was the first time they experienced a freedom of thought. They could debate politics and philosophy without the chilling fear of the Gestapo. The initial laughter was replaced with curiosity, which soon grew into quiet admiration. A key factor in this shift was the stark contrast with home. Letters from Germany painted a grim picture of shortages, bombings, and endless suffering. Meanwhile, the POWs were eating full meals and participating in cultural activities. They realized that American discipline didn't need constant fear to survive. The system worked, order was kept, and life moved forward with surprising ease, demonstrating a strength built on abundance and opportunity rather than austerity and terror. This unexpected fairness planted seeds of doubt that the hardcore Nazis within the camps, who still enforced loyalty through threats and occasional violence, could not erase. By the time the war ended, the transformation was complete for a significant number of the prisoners. They had been told America was weak and corrupt. They knew the truth was a nation of order, abundance, and quiet, industrial strength. While many returned to Germany, carrying stories of clean barracks, plentiful meals, and strange kindness, a surprising number chose to stay in the United States, drawn by the prosperity and freedom they had witnessed firsthand. Former soldiers who had laughed at the idea of American strength now built lives on the very soil they had once been trained to see as an enemy. The camps had not just held prisoners, they had transformed enemies into future immigrants, a testament to the fact that true strength sometimes simply endures and quietly changes the hearts of even the most hardened adversaries.